And today we're going to talk about what IBS actually is and what it is not, and what sort of confusing world you've landed yourself into, because IBS doesn't actually tell you a whole heck of a lot, right, Amy? So we're going to cover, all of what this name actually does tell you and what it does not tell you.
I hear, I went to my GI doc. They tested everything under the sun by conventional standards. So maybe they did an endoscopy, a colonoscopy, did some blood work. They didn't find anything, and then they were just like, oh, you have IBS, and we're kind of sent on their way. That was basically my exact experience.
And what was the, emotion on your end when they gave you that diagnosis? Did you know in your heart of hearts at that time, not really being in the medical field yet, did you know, like, hey, that sounds kind of like bullshit? Or were you just like, oh, I guess this is a thing, and then you went on your merry way?
Again, because I was an analyst working a job where my whole in life at that time revolved around solving really complex issues, like, didn't necessarily accept the diagnosis right away, but I could totally see why someone would be like, oh, I guess I just have IBS. I'm going to have to figure out a way to manage this. This is a lifelong thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of the times too, there's this assumption that, if you're given a diagnosis or given a label in the medical world, for most things, there is some sort of an answer for it.
Yeah.
It might not be a good answer, but usually there's going to be some sort of a drug or some sort of a something that they tell you, hey, you have this label, here's what you do now. Some sort of Band-Aid for your symptoms. But that's always the hope, is that a label will lead to action. And I find that that's often lacking with people who get IBS as a diagnosis, is just like, okay, later.
And then I feel like if you're continuing to pester the GI doc, continuing to have issues, they might go to the more medicine route. But when it comes to the IBS diagnosis, it's just such a hard world to work through. If you're just sticking the conventional route, there aren't that many options opened up to you, and that's a really big shame.
I think that GI doctors are frustrated by IBS because I think on some level those individual doctors know that it is a bullshit diagnosis and that it's not really giving a lot of hope or answers. Like the idea that GI doctors are recommending the low FODMAP diet, for example, and not necessarily coordinating with a dietitian or a nutritionist, and not necessarily making sure that people are nutritionally replete, but even just the idea that they're giving that as an idea in the 10-minute appointments or whatever they have to spend with their patient, in a way that's kind of hopeful. And I feel like they're trying to move in the right direction of all right, these people with IBS need some sort of answer. And I read one meta-analysis or one study, or I heard at a conference that low FODMAP was good. So, okay, cool, low FODMAP. And that's not the best way to go about it. There needs to be some degree of supervision and check-in and making sure that, again, you're not deficient in something and that you're reintroducing foods appropriately, because the typical GI route doesn't have a ton to offer.
I know a lot of my clients are like, I hate my GI doctor. It's blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And I think, again, they're trying the best. I mean, they're in a system has a lot of issues.
Broken.
Exactly. And they're not really taught lifestyle strategies. So they have a lot of limited, what's the word I'm looking for? Limited strategies that they can utilize. And if they're not really versed in a lot of the lifestyle practices, they can't really help